Hi there, this is Jen, and thanks for joining me today. Today I am making 12 cards using the Not Too Shabby box of the month for the month of March. So I'm going to be using the 2 paper pads and the ephemera packs from that box. And I'm making this really fun fold card. I generally don't like fun fold cards because measurements, and this one is really super easy to create. I actually was at the Card Maker Success Summit, which is basically an online event, and they have a bunch of presenters, and Erin Reed showed this card, and I changed it up slightly, but it is still the same fold. I absolutely love it, and it's perfect for this pattern paper. So you need 2 pieces of pattern paper for each card, or however many pieces of pattern paper you want, depending on how you want to lay out the design. But the first cuts that I'm going to be making are going to be 1.5 by 5, and depending on how many cards you want to make, I made 2 cards for each set of pattern papers that I used. So I'm going to go ahead and make 4 cuts. But if you were going to make a single card, you would just make 2 cuts. And the cuts we're making now are going to be the far left and right hand side of the card. I had a graphic pulled up where you can kind of see when I'm going to make which cuts. And so I'll go ahead and make 4 cuts using this pattern paper, and it just so happens that it cuts perfectly. I don't have any leftovers except for that small piece on the bottom where I have to cut the length a little bit shorter, but it uses basically the full 6x6 paper pad, which is always good. And I'll have linked below a document that's going to be super helpful if you're not good with measurements or you just want to refer back to it when making these cards. So I'll go ahead and leave a link. It's a Google Doc so that you can follow that if you wish. And the next cut I'm going to make is the middle portion of the paper, and this is 1 3/4 by 5. And so since I'm making 2 cards, again, I'm going to make 2 cuts because this is a single piece on the card, just that middle portion. So if you're going to make 1 card, you would only make 1 cut. But since I'm making 2, I'm going to go ahead and make 2 cuts. And then with that same paper, I'm going to create the side panels. And these are 3/4 by 5, and I don't have quite enough left over from my other cuts, so I am going to use up the rest of this piece, and then I will grab another 6x6 piece of paper to go ahead and make that very last cut. And so for 2 cards, I will be cutting 4 of these strips, and if you are making a single card, you would just be cutting this strip of paper twice. And that's it for the cutting for my first set of cards. I'm going to move on to the mat. And the mat for this first card, I'm going to do the sides first again. So the mat size is going to be cut 1 3/4 by 5 1/4. And I got out my bigger paper trimmer so I can cut these lengthwise and then just cut them in half. So I am cutting the 1 3/4 2 strips and then cut those in half, which will give me 4 pieces or 4 mats. And then the next mat I'm going to cut is 2 by 5 1/4. So I'm going to go ahead again and put that lengthwise in my paper cutter and cut the mat for that. And again, this will be cut in half, and I will only need 2 of these mats to match up with my 2 pieces of pattern paper. And I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I was totally off the screen on that. And then for my last cuts for the mat, I am going to cut those 1 by 5 1/4. So I'll cut 2 pieces that are 1 5 1/4, and then each of those is going to be split so that there are 4 mats for that. And I'll just have a little piece of extra mat paper left over. And so I've gathered all my pieces and put them with the correct mats, and I'll set those aside so that we can make the card base. For the card base, all you need is an 8.5 by 11. You're going to go ahead and cut each piece at 5.5, just like if you were creating a side fold card base. And again, I'm really bad with measurements, and so what I did was I took my scoreboard, used a dye base marker. This will wipe off right when I'm done, and I marked the areas that I don't get, which are 1/8 inches. So I'm using 3 1/8 and 5 3/8. So you're basically going to score at 2, 3 1/8, 5 3/8, and 6.5. And in that document that I'm going to leave a link below for, I have this little ruler. If you're bad at measurements like me, it was so helpful in realizing exactly where the measurements are. And so again, I will link that below, but it's a handy little tool to have if you struggle with that stuff like I do. So you're just going to go ahead and score that. I'm going to leave them flat for now. I think it's easier to adhere the matte pieces onto the flat cardstock stock rather than taking my bone folder and kind of creasing those lines already. So basically, the next part is just attaching all of the pattern paper to all of the mats. And I'm not going to bore you with watching all of that process, but I started out with the larger pieces, adding my adhesive, and then adding the paper straight up and down. But when I got to these smaller pieces, it's easier to turn my matte piece horizontally so that I could get that on as evenly as possible. And so I'm just going to go ahead and finish that off for all of the pieces for these cards. And then once all of that is done, I'm going to adhere these to my card base. And so it's easier to start with the middle and work out just to make sure that you get the spacing between the top and the bottom of that card base as evenly as possible. So I put that middle piece in first, and then I'll work my way out to the sides. And that's pretty much it for the card. All we're going to do now is crease those score lines with our bone folders. But isn't that paper adorable? I just love this paper. All of it's so cute. The little bees, I will show you some of the other completed cards. The bees are just adorable. So again, I'm just taking my bone folder and folding along those creases. And then we're going to fold this. So you can fold this in two different ways. You can fold it accordion style with those side pieces coming to the center and having that middle piece kind of be in the background. It almost looks like, I think is a gatefold card is what they're called when you can put a belly band on it. That would be kind of cool. Or you can do what I'm going to do for my cards, and that is to make that middle piece pop up and have the two side pieces on the side. And that will fold down exactly like that and fit perfectly in the card. And then for the center element, I'm using a 2-inch die cut circle on some of the cards. Some of the cards, the die cut piece is big enough where I don't use any type of circle, but really you can do anything with the card that you would like to do. And so I'm going to finish adding those different elements. And then I will show you the two cards using this set of pattern papers. And because I made lots of cards all together, I went ahead and I put each set of card pieces in these little plastic pockets that I use for my smaller stamps. It just helps to keep it organized. I learned this from participating in Kendra's card challenges. It's a really easy way to kind of keep track of all the pieces that you need for specific cards. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you. I just folded that down, and we're going to put that right in an envelope. It is slightly bulkier than a flat card, but I still think it would go through the mail with just regular postage. And there you go, folding it out. So cute. So here are all of the cards using the different pieces of pattern paper. This is probably my favorite set, is this pattern paper and these cute little bees with those rosy cheeks. So adorable. So this is the only card that I used a different colored card base. So I used a white on most of them just because I didn't want to really think about matching up different colors. And so here are all of the different cards that were created. Some are exactly the same, some just have small little differences, but this was a super fun project. If you are not a fan of fun folds, I hope this changes your mind. And if you're really skilled with like your cutting machine, like your Cricut, this probably is something that could be programmed into that somehow to make all these cuts really even easier than what they already are. But those are my cards for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did like this video, I would love a thumbs up. Don't forget to go ahead and subscribe. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.